Welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're going to dive right into an incredibly dynamic period of history. We're looking at the Indian subcontinent right between the 11th and 17th centuries. Now, if you were to look at a map of India during the 600-year span, it would literally look like a living, breathing, constantly shifting puzzle. We're talking about a landscape where frequent invasions, massive conquests, and just fierce, unyielding resistance were constantly redrawing the political boundaries. And it wasn't just lines on a map changing, right? It was a profound transformation that impacted the lives of millions. So as we patiently go through all the details of this chapter of history, we're going to unpack exactly how, and more importantly, why this map kept shifting. To make sense of 600 years of pretty dense history, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Delhi Sultanate era, move into regional powers and resistance, then cover the Mughal Empire, the Ahoms and Sikhs, administration and economy, and finally, society and cultural resilience. All right, let's jump into Section 1, the Delhi Sultanate era. The real trigger point for this massive shift in India's map crystallized in 1192. That's when the defeat of Prithviraj Chauhan completely altered the political landscape and opened the door for long-term foreign dominance in the north. Following that, from 1206 to 1526, northern India was ruled by a rapid succession of 5 main dynasties, which we collectively call the Delhi Sultanate. You have the Mamluks, also known as the Slave Dynasty, followed by the Khaljis, the Tughlaqs, the Sayyids, and finally the Lodis. Now, what is absolutely crucial to understand here is the sheer political instability. The average reign for a Delhi Sultan was only about 9 years. 9 years! It was an era defined by aggressive territorial expansion, constant plunder, and intense internal power struggles. Now, what's really interesting about this period is the sheer scale of it all. At its peak under the Tughlaqs around 1335, the Delhi Sultanate controlled a massive, sweeping portion of northern and central India. But notice the incredible contrast when you look at the south and the east. Highly fragmented, independent regional kingdoms like the Hoysalas and the eastern Genghis really held their ground. So while the Sultanate had immense power, their territorial control in the deep south was incredibly limited and just constantly being challenged. And expanding that territory wasn't just a matter of showing up to a battlefield. The logistics behind medieval warfare were staggering. Rulers like Alauddin Khilji, who actually styled himself as the second Alexander because of his immense ambition, had to fund massive operations. Think about it. You need constant production of armor and weapons. You have to secure massive daily food and water supplies. You've got to feed and train thousands of horses, war elephants, and camels. You're literally building temporary tent cities, constructing roads and bridges just to move your troops, and paying salaries to keep the soldiers from mutinying. War was breathtakingly expensive. And that meant these shifting borders required ruthless revenue collection and incredibly heavy taxation from the local populations. Moving on to Section 2, Regional Powers and Resistance. It's a rule of history that whenever an empire pushes outward, the regions push back. By the 15th and 16th centuries, the center of political gravity started moving southwards. 2 massive powers emerged, the Vijayanagara Empire and the Bahmaniya Sultanate. The Vijayanagara Empire, which really peaked under Krishnadeva, wasn't just a military powerhouse, it was a cultural juggernaut. They promoted grand temple building and literature, really proving that regional resistance was just as much about preserving cultural identity as it was about holding territory. But how did these regional identities forge such strong, lasting bonds with their people? Well, let me ask you this. What is the story behind the Hoysala's emblem? The Hoysalas, remember, were one of those fierce southern kingdoms resisting northern dominance. The answer actually lies in this fascinating piece of local folklore carved right into their architecture. According to legend, a brave young man named Sala was walking with a spiritual guru when a lion suddenly attacked them. The guru shouted in Kannada, "Hoy Sala," which translates to "strike Sala," and Sala killed the lion, saving his teacher. That legendary act of courage became the origin story and the very name of the Hoysala dynasty. It is a perfect example of how local pride, bravery, and folklore were essentially weaponized to build regional unity against foreign invaders. Okay, let's step into Section 3, the Mughal Empire. Just as regional powers were really solidifying, a massive new disruption arrived from Central Asia. In 1526, Babur defeated Ibrahim Lodi at the First Battle of Panipat, which completely reset the board once again. Following Babur, you have Humayun, Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. Now, remember how I mentioned the Delhi Sultans only averaged about 9 years on the throne? while the Mughal emperors up to Aurangzeb averaged a staggering 27 years per reign. That is a huge difference. This immense increase in stability allowed for long-term administrative reforms, clear succession practices, and monumental cultural achievements that would permanently alter India's landscape. The crucial point here is how they used that stability to expand. Akbar realized early on that military might alone just couldn't hold a diverse subcontinent. So he reshaped the map using a brilliant blend of strategic diplomacy, marriage alliances, and remarkable religious tolerance. By abolishing the jizya, which was a tax on non-Muslims, and introducing policies of universal peace, he won the loyalty of regional rulers like the Rajputs. He pulled them into his administration rather than just constantly fighting them. It was a real game changer. But empires breathe in and they breathe out. By the time we reach Aurangzeb around 1700, the Mughal Empire had achieved near pan-Indian unification. It was absolutely massive. However, this vast expansion came at a severe cost. Aurangzeb reversed a lot of Akbar's policies of tolerance. He reimposed that jizya tax, banned music in court, and engaged in widespread religious persecution. So while he definitely stretched the map to its absolute limits, his harsh policies sparked fierce, localized rebellions across the continent that would ultimately fracture the very empire he spent his entire life building. In his final days, clearly realizing the unrest he had caused, Aurangzeb wrote these haunting words in his last letters. "I came alone and am going away alone. I have not done well for the country and the people." It's a profound, incredibly human moment. It really reflects the deep isolation, guilt, and regret of a ruler whose relentless military conquests ultimately left his legacy and his empire right on the brink of collapse. That brings us to Section 4, the Ahoms and Sikhs. You see, the rebellions Aurangzeb faced weren't just random riots. They were highly organized, brilliant resistance movements. In the northeast, the Ahoms of Assam successfully resisted Mughal expansion using pure geographical genius. They used the mighty Brahmaputra River and dense hilly forests for devastating hit-and-run guerrilla warfare. But their real secret weapon? The pike system. Every single male between 15 and 50 was registered as a citizen soldier, serving in rotation. This meant the king had a massive, constant army without the terrible economic drain of a full-time standing military. This brilliant system allowed them to decisively defeat the Mughals at the famous Battle of Saragat in 1671. Meanwhile, over in the northwest, the Sikhs were forging a completely different kind of resistance. Originally founded by Guru Nanak in the 15th century as a spiritual movement championing absolute equality and rejecting caste, the community faced severe persecution under Mughal rule. The brutal martyrdom of Sikh gurus like Guru Arjan and Guru Tegh Bahadur for refusing to convert to Islam really became a catalyst. It forced the community to arm itself to protect religious freedom, culminating in 1699 when Guru Gobind Singh formed the Khalsa. This was a highly disciplined order of saint soldiers that would eventually go on to forge their own powerful empire. Let's look under the hood in Section 5, Administration and Economy. We've talked a lot about battles and borders today, but how did you actually manage the money and the land to keep these massive state machines running? Well, the Delhi Sultanate relied on the Ikta system. Under this system, the Sultan granted land to nobles, called Iqtidars, who then extracted taxes to maintain themselves and their local armies. It was pretty decentralized. The Mughals, however, introduced the Mansabdari system under Akbar, and this was a highly structured, centralized bureaucracy. Every officer, or Mansabdar, was given a rank that dictated exactly how many cavalry troops they had to maintain for the empire. Paired with incredibly detailed land surveys and crop pricing reforms, this allowed the Mughals to efficiently extract wealth from a thriving agrarian base to fund their vast pan-Indian empire. And finally, Section 6, Society and Cultural Resilience. So, what about the everyday people living beneath these shifting borders? While dynastic warfare raged above them, the people below adapted, and they survived. The agrarian economy just kept pumping out wheat, rice, and cotton. A really sophisticated banking network known as the Hundi system allowed merchants to safely transfer money across warring borders. Ports like Surat and Calicut thrived with international trade. And through it all, art and culture didn't just survive, they absolutely flourished. Temples acted as massive centers of learning, economy, and community, really anchoring the people through times of deep political instability. Which leaves us with this incredible question to ponder. How does cultural identity survive and even thrive through 600 years of shifting borders, heavy taxation, and constantly changing rulers? It is a true testament to the immense resilience of the everyday people on the Indian subcontinent, whose local traditions, agrarian networks, and shared folklore proved far stronger than the armies that marched across their lands. Keep questioning the map, keep digging into the incredible history that drew those lines, and thanks so much for joining